Today I'm going to take 4 sheets of pattern paper and turn it into 12 cards with no scraps left over. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome. Today is the Bringing Back Basic Gray collaboration. It's a collaboration I do with my friend Sarah, who's crafting and relaxing here on YouTube, and Kathy, who is Stampin' Cat over on Instagram. And each month we pull out a few of our Basic Gray papers and play with them. Basic Gray does not make paper anymore. They have switched to fabric, and we have been hoarding it since the early 2000s when they stopped making it. And we decided that instead of hoarding it and not gaining anything from it, other than, I guess, the comfort of hoarding it, that we were going to pull some out each month and enjoy them. So today I have 3 pieces from the 2 Scoops collection, one more of a solid and then 2 patterns. And I am going to be using them along with my No Scraps sketch set 16 to make 12 cards for the Cards for Cubs card drive. So that's my plan today. So let's get to it. My sketch set 16 is free to download, and so I will link that in the description box below for you if you don't already have it. But the first thing I'm going to do is cut down all of my papers. I'm going to cut the 2 pattern papers down exactly the same, following along with the cutting guide on the front page of my sketch set. And as I cut, I kind of like to lay things out in the order that they are on the cutting guide. So as I cut each piece, I will kind of put them in the same order as where they are on the cutting guide, and just kind of off to the side. And what this will help me do here in a bit is when I go to kind of put all the pieces away, I'm not using baggies for these, but I have 3 sketches in the sketch set, so I'm going to have 3 piles. I'm going to have a pile for all the A pieces, a pile for all the B pieces, and a pile for all the C pieces. So by laying it out in the order it is on the cutting guide, I can easily just kind of reference the cutting guide, grab the pieces for each sketch. And while I am cutting, I do want to talk a little bit about Cards for Cubs. If you followed me for a while, you've heard me talk about it. You may be familiar with it and already donating cards. But Cards for Cubs is an organization that is sponsored by Barely Art Glue. And they collect cards each March, handmade cards with positive, like, encouragement or birthday sentiments. And they collect them and then distribute them to kids in the foster care system. It's just kind of a way to help those foster care kids know they're not alone, know that there is someone out there who's supporting them, cheering them on, thinking about them, things like that. So it's just such a great organization, and it's such a fun way for us as card makers to give back and help spread and share some joy, with the cards that we make. So I will have Cards for Cubs linked in the description box below. The guidelines are pretty simple. The card has to be handmade. It has to be either a positive or encouragement type sentiment or a birthday sentiment, and it does have to have an envelope. So you can find all that on their website. Right now they are in kind of like, everyone's in like the prep phase. There is a pledge form that you can fill out to pledge how many cards that you will be donating in March. And then come March, when they actually start collecting the cards, you will send in kind of an updated pledge form with your card donation. And it just kind of, helps them keep track of things. So right now, they're not collecting. Right now, everybody's just kind of prepping and planning, and then come March 1st, you can start sending the cards in. So all that is on the website link that I will have in the description box below for you. And I'll also have any products that I use today. They're still available. Obviously, the Basic Gray paper isn't available. You can do this with any paper. Now that I've got my pattern paper done, there is a cutting guide for an 8.5 or for 8.5 by 11 inch cardstock. And I believe you need, I don't have it in front of me anymore, but I believe you would need 2 or 3 pieces of cardstock, but I have 12 by 12 paper, so I'm basically just taking it and cutting it down to 4 by 5 and a quarter inch pieces to fit an A2 size card. It'll be my card mat. And I realized I had chosen my papers before I chose the sketch that I wanted to use, and realized I wanted to bring in another piece. So I found a pink piece that coordinates with the patterns as well, and I'm going to do the same thing, just cutting it down into 6 4 by 5 and a quarter inch panels that will work as card mats. And then I will have some strips left over on here that will be used in a couple places on the front of the cards, and then otherwise we'll use it up on the insides of the cards. Now that I have all my pieces cut, I can start the fun part of assembling. So again, I have a pile for each sketch, and I'm just pulling from pile A right now. I'm going to do a dry fit just to see how I kind of want to put these patterns together. This paper's not double-sided, and so I'm, stuck with these 2 patterns. So I want to make sure that I can find a way to make these 2 patterns work across all the cards, regardless of the combinations. So I'm going to go ahead and add adhesive to the back of my card mat and go ahead and put these down on my card bases. And I'm doing all 4. This is kind of like the assembly line style that I tend to work in. I will go ahead and get all 4 adhered to the card bases, and then can work on adding the different layers. And what I'm going to do today is I will finish 1 card from each sketch, like all the way through with you, and then I'll finish the other 3 cards from those sketches like off camera, but then kind of show you what I did, or show you how they ended up. But it's there's 3 sketches, you're making 4 cards with each sketch, and so it's pretty repetitive. So I will make 1 with you and then do the rest off camera. Getting ready to add my second layer here. And this horizontal piece actually goes across the full width of the A2 card base. So it is 4 1/4 inches long. That's why I wanted to go ahead and put my mat down on the card base before I started adhering layers down. And I chose to do the polka dot on that blue paper, and then the kind of blue swirly paisley-ish pattern I'm going to put on the pink mat so that it stands out a little bit. I kind of regret choosing the blue, just because since I ended up using the blue as a card mat instead of like one of the pattern papers, it does make it hard to layer the blue swirly pattern, but I managed to make it work. So here I'm just adding the opposite pattern of my kind of horizontal piece as the vertical piece. Here I'm trying to decide what I want to do. I mean, it works, it looks okay, but I want to make that blue patterned paper stand out a little bit more. So I do decide to go and bring in some white cardstock just to put behind it. This isn't part of the sketch, but like I said, because I chose that blue, because I'm using the blue paper as the mat, the blue pattern just kind of blends in. So I need to separate that a little bit. You could add matting layers to all of these. My sketches don't necessarily always call for matting layers, but you can totally add them. It's up to you. I can't guarantee you no scraps though from any additional matting layers that you bring in. So like if you bring in additional cardstock for that, you probably will have scraps. I can only guarantee you no scraps for the cutting guides that I give you, for the items that I give you cutting guides for, I guess. But my sketches are totally meant to be a jumping off point. A lot of times they're not super detailed. They're pretty basic. So if you're a beginning card maker, you can still accomplish these very easily. You could leave them as they are with the sketch, or you could continue to add things to them until your heart's content. Make them what you want them to be. So I'm digging into some of those strips from the bottom of those two solid papers for an additional strip that I'm going to be adding kind of with my sentiment across the front of the card. And so this is the point where I'm going to go ahead and just finish one card with you, and then we'll finish the other three. You've already seen most of the work, but as far as the finishing and detail goes, I decided I wanted to cut these little strips into a little angled banner. And then now I need to find a sentiment. I decided to use a stamp set from the Stamps of Life, and it's called Bold Inspiration. It's just got a bunch of great, positive, encouraging sentiments, and I'm using the one that says, "You are amazing." I think or awesome. I can't tell from the stamp. But there's like, "You are amazing, you are awesome," sending happy thoughts, "You've got this." There's just a bunch of great stamps on that stamp set. And for cards, like the cards for Cubs look for. So it's kind of one of my go-to stamp sets for this. But yeah, "You are awesome" is the one I'm using. And I also like it because they are bold and big. They can act as kind of a focal point, so I don't necessarily have to have an embellishment along with the sentiment. So since this piece of scrap white cardstock that I'm using is big enough, I'm going to go ahead and stamp 2 of these while I have that piece in there, and then off camera I do stamp 2 more. And I'm using my MISTI just to help me make sure I get a nice, clear, crisp stamped image, just because it is a larger sentiment. Sometimes in the middle, if I don't use my MISTI, I can kind of get not as dark there in the middle of it. And then I also decide that I want to do a little bit of something to the sentiment rectangle instead of just leaving it as a rectangle. So I'm going to pull out my corner rounder and just round the edges so that there's a little bit of a rounded element on all of the hard lines and angles in this card. And then I also decide that I want to add a little bit something extra. So I have this strip of circles that I cut from scrap vinyl that I'm going to use. They're very similar to what you could get from like Love from Lizzie. They're what I call my non-dimensional enamel dots. So we finished that one card. Here are the other 4. I finished them all pretty much the same way. So now we are moving on to sketch B. I'm going to sort out the pieces that I need. And then we'll again do a dry fit, just to make sure it's going to lay the way it's supposed to. And I apologize that I'm kind of off down there at the bottom, but when I go to actually assemble, I will have it up high enough that you can see me. So making sure that the patterns work on the mat that I'm going to use it for, and then we'll again go and do kind of an assembly line glue process, but this time I'm only working like with 2 of the patterns at one time. And I totally put this polka dot paper on the pink and had intended to put it on the blue. Didn't think about it until I went to glue down my blue patterns here, and I'm like, wait a minute, why would I don't want to put this on the blue. So luckily I am able to peel off that polka dot paper. So I'm like, come on. Again, left this in here to show you that, sometimes you can easily correct your mistakes. One nice thing about using tape runner, or at least with the ATG tape runner adhesive, it takes a bit to fully like cure and set, so you do have some time. So I just peeled the matte layer away from the pattern paper and am able to reuse it. It came off very cleanly, so that worked out well for me. Could save my butt from my mistake. I mean, worst case, I could have just trimmed the blue down, added a white matte layer, and it would have been fine. But glad I could make it work the way I really intended it to work. So now I'm going to go ahead and put all these pieces onto their card bases. Love to know, do you make cards for Cubs? They've been around for 4 or 5 years now, so I think they're kind of growing in popularity with each year. So if you let me know how many years you've been making cards for them, or if you're just now hearing about them, tell me that in the comments below. Kind of just curious. So now I'm going to add that little strip down at the very bottom with the same pattern as the, I try to match the thin strip with the pattern of the big piece that I've already put on, and then the fishtail banner piece that's going vertical on the card will be the opposite pattern. And again, making one with you, and I'm going to do the rest of them all the same way. So I did switch to wet glue here just because it's easier for the size or the shape of these pieces. So I had some stamped images in my stash that I wanted to try and use, and then I'm going to be using the Your Cool sentiment from the Critter Pop stamp set from Not Too Shabby Shop. And these images that I'm using were also stamped from the Cute Critters. I don't know, there's another stamp set from Not Too Shabby that's, I think, retired, that I had kind of pre-stamped and die cut these out from when I was using up some scraps last year. So I pulled out some that had colors that would work with the pattern papers, and I'm going to use those as an embellishment on this particular sketch. The sketch did call for a circle sentiment or embellishment, but mine is going to be a rectangle, and it's going to contain both an embellishment and sentiment. So usually when I give you a shape on the front of your card, if it's not something that you've cut from one of the cutting guides, then it is free choice. You can use whatever shape works best for your card. So then I will put him down, and these little critters are, their hands are kind of die cut separate, like not separate, but they're not, there's a space underneath their arms where they could hold something. And so I didn't intend initially to do that, but I thought, oh, I think I have a heart punch over here that will work just for that. So I just punched a little heart out of some of the scraps I had. And there's those little guys. And now we are on our final sketch, sketch C. And this one had like a 2 by 2 inch piece that you were to cut in half. And I wanted to wait until I got to the sketch to do this, just to make it easier for me to keep track of what was what. And again, we'll do a dry fit. So this one, I was trying to figure out, did I want to put the blue larger pattern on the blue background, or do I want to do the strips, like the blue strips on the blue background? And ultimately, I think I decided to do the blue strips on the blue background so that that larger focal image will stand out a little bit more. Again, I could have matted it. Just sometimes I get a little lazy that if it looks good enough without a mat, then I will go ahead and use it without a mat. And I am using Barely Art Glue for my wet glue. This is the mini size. And it's my go-to wet glue just because it's easy to use. I like that it comes with a fine tip top that, you know, I can control the amount of glue coming out a little bit better. and it holds really well. So once I get this built up, I will go ahead and put it on my card base. And then I can start figuring out how I want to embellish this one. I do need another strip from those two like more solid pieces. I'm going to pull in strips from those to go on the front. And then this time I'm going with the Sending Warm Thoughts stamp from that Stamps of Life Bold Inspiration stamp set. Cutting down some cardstock that's wide enough that once I stamp it, I can die cut a circle out of it, because I do want to have like a circle image on the front of this one. I just thought it would fill the card well. Oh, Sending Happy Thoughts, sorry. Again, kind of double stamping to make sure I get a nice crisp image, and then we'll flip my scrap around and do the same thing. And then once these are stamped, I will go over to my die cutting station and die cut 2 larger circles out of those, and I did go ahead and I stamped the other 2 and did all 4 at the same time. So now I can layer it on the front of my card. I'm going to have that strip facing towards the left, and then my circle sentiment on the right. And then I also pulled out some butterfly embellishments that I thought worked well with the pattern paper. So I am going to add one on here, just kind of it's going to sit on that strip to the left, kind of like a shelf. So I found one that worked, and these are just some die cuts that I already had done in my stash. I always like to create some using scraps. And then this card will be done. So here are those last 4 cards that I finished putting together. I just used various butterflies that I had already had die cut in my stash. So that was the 4 from Sketch C. This was Sketch B. And then Sketch A. So 12 cards. I didn't have any scraps. I did use whatever paper I had left over on the inside. There were a few pieces from the pattern, like the actual 2 patterns that I used. And then because my cardstock for matting, like these more solid patterns were 12 by 12 instead of 8.5 by 11 that my cutting guide called for, I did have some extra scraps of those. But again, they kind of all went on the inside of the cards as well. So those are my basic gray cards. I've got 12 more cards to send to Cards for Cubs. Check out the description box for links for Cards for Cubs and for Sarah and Kathy so you can see what they've made. And my sketch set will be down there as well. Thank you all so very much for your time as always, and hope you all have a very crafty day.